Hello, everyone. This is Toni Robinson. Thank you for inviting me in to present to you today. Sorry that I can't see you, and that you probably can't see me either, but we'll just go ahead and forge forward. I am excited to be here to share with you some ways that we can decrease the achievement gap through STEM, and I'll just jump right in. I'm going to get started by sharing information that comes directly from the Alabama State Department of Education. And the Alabama Department of Education says, every child a graduate and every graduate prepared. That is the mission. That is what the goal is. And quite honestly, that is the great promise and challenge of public education, to teach and prepare all students for the future. If we think about it, education is really the great equalizer. And so as you think about the future and what we're preparing students for, when we consider the time that school first started, this is pretty much what the world of work looked like back then. However, as you think about today, our society, and in particular, the way we work, looks very different. So in this new machine age, with convergence of technologies and things like machine learning and artificial intelligence, the future that we're preparing students for looks quite different. Another thing to consider is that this new digital age makes the way that we process information, that we work together, that we interact, that we collaborate, look very different as well. I'm going to quickly walk you through a few different changes that we're seeing in society to just kind of give you more insight into what I'm talking about. So as you consider how we transport people and things around the world, these are some changes that we see taking place. Some of you may be familiar with Waymo, which is the car on the left. Think Uber without a driver, right? So this is a commercial ride-hailing service that doesn't utilize a driver, and someone had to design this, someone had to innovate, someone had to come up with it, had to program it. On the right, you'll see Hyperloop, and Hyperloop is also a new way to move people through low-pressure tubes with levitated pods, and you can move them very quickly, and you can get from like New York to DC in less than an hour when that's completed. So these are some developments that we're seeing in transportation. Additionally, we're seeing technology change the way we exchange money, change the types of currency that we use. The emergence of technologies like blockchain have caused rapid changes in things like cryptocurrency that we're seeing. And we're also seeing shifts occur in medicine. So in the medical field right now, doctors rely on telemedicine and telehealth to help diagnose and treat patients at a distance. Additionally, technology is affecting even the way that our food is prepared. Artificial intelligence and robotics are changing the way that our food is prepared and delivered. What you're looking at right now is an artisanal pizza shop in California where the robot does all the preparation and then delivers the food. So when you think about these things, it makes you wonder what jobs are being replaced, and then what jobs and opportunities are going to be available for students moving forward. Technology changes a lot, but it also brings about a lot of new and unforeseen opportunities that we did not consider before. So on the screen, I have 3 images of 3 different young people. And I don't know if you guys have access to the chat. I can see the chat window. So if you know any of these people, just put the number and the name next to it and enter it into the chat, and let's see if it pops up. I'm going to wait about 10 seconds. So I'm not really seeing anything in the chat window. Does that mean that no one knows any of these people? Or does that mean my chat window is not working? All right, I am gonna just forge ahead then and let you know who they are. So number 1, the gentleman on the left, his name is Tyler Blevins, but he's more known as Ninja. And Ninja is he's a streamer, a professional gamer, and he streams his professional gaming. He has over 24 million subscribers on YouTube. and he earns $500,000 a month. I'll repeat that. $500,000 a month, professional gamer on YouTube. In the middle, you'll see little Michaela. Little Michaela is a CGI social media influencer. And what I mean by that is she is a computer-generated image. So she's not real, but she has a following of over 2.9 million people. She is on Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, and in 2016, she was named one of Time's most influential people on the internet. And then number 3 is PewDiePie. PewDiePie is probably one of the most famous and controversial, or I should say notorious, gamers online. He was for quite a while the highest earning YouTuber, and in 2016, I believe, he reached $15 million as his earning on YouTube. That's just on YouTube. Okay, so why do I share these people? I share them because I think it's important to realize that the ways in which our young people are going to be able to create new opportunities for themselves are a little different than the ways in which we may be used to. So when you think about who could generate or create these types of opportunities for themselves, do you think it would be student A or do you think it would be student B? I come back to your motto, every child a graduate and every graduate prepared. As we consider preparing students, we're preparing them for a changing world. We're preparing them for their future, not our past. So students are going to need more than just the content that we've been giving them in segmented sections. They're going to need quite a bit more information and ways of creating opportunity for themselves. They're going to need to be more innovative. They're going to need to think more critically. They're going to need to collaborate and take advantage of all the opportunities that come about. So traditionally, this is what our educational system has looked like when it came to instruction. It's been very isolated. We see our subjects neatly in little buckets. And then when students get out in the world, this is what they have to deal with. It all comes together. So as a system, we have to do a better job of helping students figure out how to bring it together earlier and how to get the skills and knowledge to be able to adapt in an ever-changing society. STEM really gives us a way to prepare all students for a changing world. When I think about STEM, I don't think it's a class. It's really a culture within your school system. And traditionally, STEM is considered science, technology, engineering, and math. But we know that in every district, the way STEM is described, the way it's defined, the way it's actually rolled out looks a little different. And at Discovery, we like to say that STEM is students and teachers energizing minds. Now, it's also worth noting that, STEM is not new, right? Innovation has been around for a long time. Humans have been creating and coming up with different things. But what is new is the fact that we have the digital, and the digital makes things able to be replicated much quicker. What is new is that we're living in exponential times. And so as an industry, education is really poised for a massive sea change. We're going to see the pace of acceleration continue to change. Computing power itself is growing exponentially. And we know that as time goes on, that's only going to increase. If you think about just some of the changes you've seen in the last 10 years, it's moving at warp speed. So when we consider STEM, we're really thinking about how can we help students prepare for the future, but also become contributors in that change and be impactful in society. So this is the grand engineering challenges. Part of STEM is the grand engineering challenges, and when we consider that, we're thinking, what is it that we're going to need to control or improve upon to make our life on the planet even better? So the National Academy of Engineering came up with 4 cross-cutting themes: sustainability, health, security, and the joy of living. And these are some of the categories that fall under those 4 buckets. In addition to that, today's students are grappling or will continue to grapple with some very real world problems. And so they're going to need the information and the skills to be able to solve them. The UN has these sustainable development goals, and I hate that number 1 isn't on there because number 1 is no poverty, right? And so they're suggesting that students moving forward are going to need to be able to solve these problems, these sustainable development goals, in order to continue, for us to continue as a society. Now, STEM falls into this category, and STEM creates a purpose for that literacy and numeracy that we want students to be so good at. When we tell students, oh, you've got to get better at math, you've got to get better at reading, you've got to improve your science, without providing them the context within which they'll use it, it sort of falls on deaf ears. So let me share with you some of the opportunities that exist for your students in the world of work. There is an increasing demand for STEM workers and for computer scientists in the US and specifically in Alabama. STEM workers are very much in high demand, but there is, as we know, a disproportionate participation in STEM by women and by people of color. And so as school systems, we have to think about how can we increase that? How can we bring more students, more students of color, more girls to that STEM pipeline? Here are just some numbers that may be of interest to you as you think about Alabama in particular. In 2019, there were approximately 4,000 aerospace engineers working in Huntsville, Alabama. By the way, Huntsville, Alabama was listed as number 3 in STEM cities to live in. By 2026, there will be 850,000 STEM-related opportunities in Alabama. So I ask you, are your students ready to step into those positions? I think as board members and administrators, the thing to consider is access, process, and outcome. When I say access, what opportunities are your systems providing for students to gain entry into the STEM fields? When I say process, are you creating systems that allow all students to gain access? And is it providing individual students with what they need? And then when I say outcome, I'm really talking about educational experiences that ensure that all students are meeting objectives and goals. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. But really, to meet the workforce demands, both in Alabama and nationwide, we're going to have to do some serious work. The US needs more STEM talent. We have students here. Why not prepare them to be able to step into those fields? It pays really well to be in a STEM field. So why not create students, allow students to step into those jobs? And we know that moving forward, the talent, it's only going to grow. So let's look at some opportunity gaps that exist right now in Alabama. It's known that in order for students to be successful in STEM, algebra in the 8th grade is a key indicator. So I invite you, as you think about your systems that you support, when are students taking algebra? Who's taking algebra? How are students directed to algebra? And how can we better funnel students into algebra classes? The other gap is hands-on learning experiences. Are we giving students enough real-world, relevant, hands-on learning experiences in environments that simulate what they would experience outside of the classroom? And high-quality STEM instruction. Qualifications of teachers. What kind of preparation do teachers have to be able to support their students in the STEM fields? And then out-of-school learning experiences. Are we creating opportunities for students to get pathways out of school where they can beef up their STEM skills? And last but definitely not least are the math and science performance indicators, right? Like making sure that we're raising those math scores, we're raising those science scores, we're raising those literacy scores so that students can step into some of these jobs. I'm just quickly going to share with you some of the positions that are out there. I don't know about you, but when I went to school, there was no such thing as a cloud service specialist. There were no iOS developers when I went to school. There was no iOS, right? That's the platform for development for Apple apps, right? So what we know is that moving forward, many of the jobs that our students are going to be stepping into do not currently exist today. And some of our students are going to create those jobs, and some are going to need to be prepared to step into the jobs and the positions that have been created. So those who create the future. And I ask you, what opportunities do students have within your districts to create? And what opportunities are they being given to think about how they will impact the future? Those are some things to consider. Here's some additional STEM positions that we know are coming out. There's nanotechnology, there's biotechnology. I mean, we could go on about all the different fields, but as we consider the STEM jobs, we also have to think about the STEM in the jobs. There may be positions that are not necessarily traditionally STEM positions, but they require students to use STEM-related skills like critical thinking, analyzing, evaluating, synthesizing. And so it can't hurt them to be able to use those skills moving forward. But what we know about life is that as innovation and technology move forward, there's some people who are not going to be moving forward and may get left behind. And I think this is where our schools have the rare opportunity and are really positioned to make an impact and ensure that all students get what they need. I invite you to consider that STEM teaching and learning is not just for a select group of students, but it's really for all students. And so in the next section, I want to really talk about how can we make this more inclusive? What are some steps you can take to really bring about an inclusive environment where all students are supported through STEM? So we're going to use a framework created by Dr. Ronnie Ellington, and it really breaks it into about 4 areas: student agency, school practices, teacher development, and community capital. And we can use this framework to really cultivate teacher and student mindsets and ensure that STEM education is equitable in our system. We can also use it to do the hard work of internal examination to determine what are we doing as we support school systems and where are the gaps that we need to change and what changes can we make. So first, I want to talk a little bit about student agency, identity, and resiliency, because really in order for students to be successful, we have to remember that they are the reason we're there. And so I think it's appropriate that we start with the students and looking at them. So thinking about students, I mentioned agency, identity, and resiliency. And really what I mean by all of this is students need to understand that they are competent STEM learners. And our systems need to be in a position where they are supporting that and fostering that image for students and helping them to understand that they are competent. All right, are you guys ready for a little quiz? Again, I'm going to invite you to use the chat window, and hopefully it works. If it doesn't, I'll just give you the answers. Okay, so on the screen, you'll see someone, and if you know his name, just enter it in the chat window. Okay, I see nothing in the chat window. No one knows who this is? Someone has to know who this is. Okay, well, I'll just give you the answer. And by the way, this is not the way I suggest we do instruction, right? This is Albert Einstein, and he developed, as you know, the theory of relativity. And I think as I go to districts throughout the country, this is probably the image I see most in science classrooms. I think he's very recognizable. Most of my students and your students would probably know who he is and where he is. I mean, not where he is, but what he's done. All right, I'm going to put up 2 more images, and I invite you, I think that there is no chat window. So what I'm going to do is just invite you to think about, do you know who these 2 women are? 1 and 2. Maybe, can you guys put, is there a questions box maybe? Okay. So number 1 someone may know, this is Bessie Coleman. Bessie Coleman was the first African American and Native American woman pilot. And on the right is number 2, Amelia Earhart. And she was an American pilot and the first female aviator to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. So, okay, I'm seeing answers. Oh, great, in the question box. Love it, thank you. So these are 2 women who were pioneers, who were pilots, and I wonder how many of our students know about them, know their stories, or anything like that. All right, let's go to the next. I have 3 people up here, and I see the question box is working. So if you guys want to jot number 1, 2, or 3 in the question box, let's see if anyone knows who they are. All right, so yes, Timothy, thank you. They're astronauts. I love it. Yes. So number 1 is, yes, Ellen Ochoa. And Ellen Ochoa is a former astronaut. She is a former director of the Johnson Space Center, and she was the first Hispanic woman to go into space. She was on the Space Shuttle Discovery. Number 2, most of you probably got Neil Armstrong. Everyone knows Mr. Armstrong as the man who landed on the moon. And number 3, Mae Jemison. And Mae Jemison was the first African American woman to go into space, and she was on Space Shuttle Endeavour. So these are 3 people that have been astronauts, and I venture to say most of us know Neil Armstrong, and not so much with 1 and 3. And so I invite you to think about identity. Many students see Albert Einstein, they don't connect. They don't see themselves with messy hair and looking like Albert Einstein. And so it is important that all of our students are able to see a place for themselves in STEM. And we can help them do this by tailoring the delivery of content in a way to reflect our students and in a way that reflects our communities. And we have to keep in mind that the concept of STEM identity crosses gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic categories. All students are capable of STEM literacy. And our systems have to understand that, they have to believe that, and they have to be committed to ensuring that all students have an opportunity to see themselves in STEM. Additionally, we have to, in addition to providing them with role models, we as educators have to allow students to take ownership of their learning. And this is where the board and the administration really comes in, because for so often teachers have been in charge of student learning. And this is a cultural shift, it's a mind shift, really promoting self-directed learning, helping students to think through what's going to be important to their lives, to their communities, how they can make an impact. That's going to require the drive and the support of the board. All right, I'm putting up some more images. I'm not giving you a quiz on this one. These are 3 young ladies who have been movers and shakers in the area of STEM. The first lady on the left with the pen, her name is Tanvi Koch. At 17, she's developed an app called Insulink, which monitors insulin through artificial intelligence. And she also has created an app that's a buddy system for women on university systems to help make the university campus a safer place for women. In the middle, you'll see Dorothy Jean Tillman. Dorothy Jean Tillman is an anomaly, I will say that. At 14, I'll say this again, at the age of 14, she graduated with a master's degree in sustainable science and environmental planning. She is also working on STEM labs for kids, and she's committed to making sure that all kids have access to STEM. And then on the right is Ann Lee. And Ann Lee founded an artificial intelligence workshop called All Girl Rhythm. Get it? It's like a twist on algorithm. And she is providing opportunities for girls to work on STEM. She's developing her second app, and she does competitive STEM programming. And so I share these young ladies as a way of saying there are role models out there. There are opportunities for students to see themselves. There are opportunities for them to learn about resiliency in STEM. And these young ladies understand how they can use their STEM skills to make the world a better place. So as we think about really helping students become globally literate citizens, I think our systems have to shift from just the narrative of employment, right? Like I've talked a lot about the job opportunities. I've talked a lot about, you know, the new shifts that are coming and the roles and creating jobs and earning income. But STEM is great for jobs. We all agree. But STEM is great for living. And so I think it's important to shift the narrative from just employment centered to living centered. How can we help students understand that if they learn some STEM skills, their lives will essentially become better and the lives of those in their community will become better as well. So it used to be when kids were growing up, we would say, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be? And I think now the question is, what problems do you want to solve when you grow up? And another question we can ask them is, how do you want to live when you grow up? This is important because STEM can help you live the life you want to live. And it can help you change, you know, the circumstances of you, your family, and your community. So really understanding that this is going to shift the needle for our students and for our systems when we start changing that narrative from just jobs to STEM for life. And so in terms of next steps, what you can do as a board, I think it's important that you create student-centric policies. Focus on doing what's right for kids, moving from equity work in theory to practice, and really making sure that you craft policies that encompass equity and empowerment throughout the district, not just for the students, but also for the teachers. And then eliminating any barriers that disadvantage students. Really going through and examining what are the policies that we have in place? What are some obstacles for all of our students to access STEM? How can we eliminate that and create a more equitable system for our students? And then holding everyone accountable, holding teachers accountable, holding administrators accountable, holding yourselves, the board accountable to make those changes. And then last but not least is raising the bar of expectations. It's not okay to say, you know, typically, you know, this group of students, our girls really underperform in science, and this group of students performs really well in this. When we have that predictability, there's an issue. There's a problem within the way our system is rolling out. So really raising the bar that everyone is expected to perform at high levels, and then getting to the root cause of why that's not happening and making the necessary changes so that we can do that. Now, I've talked a lot about the students and their agency and resiliency and identity. I want to shift a little bit to teachers, because teachers are the most significant lever in that classroom for raising achievement and for enhancing student performance. And one of the things that we say at Discovery Education is you have to teach like the future depends on it, because it does. And STEM teaching and learning requires significant instructional shifts, not just a few, but a lot. We're moving from just teaching, you know, the content in buckets to having inquiry-based learning, project-based learning, having students do the 4 C's: creativity, collaboration, communication, critical thinking, really having real-world challenges and creating relevant learning and bringing that all together. And most teachers were not taught to teach that way. Most teachers were not taught to teach that way. It's not a flaw, it's not a deficit, it is just merely an observation. They were not taught to teach that way. So we're going to have to provide opportunities for our teachers to become STEM teachers in order to help our students become STEM learners. And so I want to talk a little bit about how we can do that. Teachers are more than just content experts, and that's something as a system we already know, right? Like our teachers do so much more, but they are truly game changers. They are agents of transformation. And so if we think about them as critical partners in transforming lives, then we understand that they need to be proficient in life-changing areas. So we have to create a workplace for our staff where they're getting regular professional development, where they're getting support for shared leadership, where they're able to make decisions and instructional shifts that empower their students, and where they're receiving appreciation for what they're doing. The school teams also need exposure to STEM career pathways. Many times they're not aware and of all of the opportunities and the pathways that are available for their students. So providing them with that is essential, and showing them how they can become better at doing that. And so what can you do as a board to support the teachers and to support their development and their empowerment? One thing is to invest in human capital. And by that, I mean recruiting, training, paying good wages to teachers, to people who are going to be those agents of transformation. Really looking at how can your teacher base more reflect your student base? How can your teachers come with the skills necessary to do the work around STEM? And building their capacity at every level. And I'm not just talking about teachers here, I really mean all staff. Really, we need to invest in building their capacity. And then as a board, you can foster a culture of support for STEM equity. When that is part of your mission, when it is driven from the board, it makes such a difference systemically. Instead of having just pockets of STEM excellence, you have system-wide STEM excellence, and that makes a huge difference. And then you can plan for leadership turnover. We know that some teachers are going to leave within the first 5 years. They're like 30% of teachers leave in the first 5 years. We know that there's turnover in superintendents. We know that there's turnover in directors and coordinators. So as a board, planning for that turnover, but also building the capacity of people in the system to step into those positions is essential. And then engaging in professional learning experiences. And this should be system-wide. Everyone needs to be involved in the process of professional learning. You're doing it now. I commend you for that. Continue to do those kinds of things. Having your superintendents do that, all the administrators engaging in professional learning, and then the teachers as well. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about school practices and curriculum. And this is an area where we can really make an impact by looking at everything in the system, from instruction to assessment to funding, and how that makes a difference in supporting achievement and equity. So, you know, in high achieving school districts, the boards are really focused on policies that support positive changes in the condition and the environment of all the schools. And I want to talk a little bit about that, because it's not okay for us to say some of our schools are doing well and some are not. We have to look at the system, and you as a board members have the ability and the power to say, we're going to make this a little bit more equitable across the board within our district. Why are we seeing these results here and not here? These are great opportunities that some of our schools have. What can we do to share that and move it throughout? So really, STEM education is critical and vital for all students. And so how do you use your authority, your power, and your decision-making capacity as a board to promote policy that's going to lead to transformation? Some of the areas where you can really infuse your thinking and support the district as it's shifting is in the curriculum and the courses. What courses are offered, and making sure that they're offered across the board and that students have access. And if I'm at one school and they're not offering it, maybe I go to the other school where they're supporting it. Identifying and celebrating excellence and scaling that throughout the district. So if you see something that's working in a particular school, or you hear about something in a particular classroom that's quite successful, you have the ability to help administrators scale that district-wide. And you want to celebrate that and point to those lights for other schools to be aware of. Instructional materials. Making sure that you go through a rigorous vetting process to ensure that the instructional materials that are being used in your school system reflect the students who are in your school system. And then fiscal accountability. You've all heard the phrase, put your money where your mouth is, right? So we say this is what we support. We say we want all students to access STEM curriculum. We want all students to achieve. Are we distributing our funds the way we say that we want that to happen? So some of the things that I think you can do as a board to support school practices and curriculum is really setting the vision, helping your district to really understand what is your vision for STEM, what are the goals, and what's your timeline. Creating system-wide coherence where it all works together and there's shared leadership and there's information that's going around and that everyone's getting access to the courses. And then developing those conditions to support STEM equity. And last but not least, really taking apart those policies that support disparities. I want to talk next about community capital. And by community capital, I'm really talking about social capital and cultural capital. And we recognize when we look at the capital that students bring and the community brings to the classroom, we're really acknowledging the historic, the cultural, and the social context of education. And we're saying, you know what, we're going to draw on that rich resource in the community to enhance our teaching and learning. We're going to tap into those funds of knowledge in that community. And we're going to build on that by strengthening our partnerships in the community, by highlighting role models in the community, by supporting mentoring programs and academic programs from throughout the community. And so I think there are three things that we can do as we talk about capital. And just so we're all clear on the terms, when I talk about social capital, I'm really talking about those, the intangible resources that are built into our interpersonal relationships. So you can think of it as like the social norms, the networks that we have, who we know, and how we move, right? So that's kind of our social capital. And then knowing how to act in certain situations. So in school, traditionally, if you come with a particular social capital, you're rewarded because you know how to interact in the school. If you don't know how to interact in the school, you don't have the school social capital. And the same thing is with cultural capital. It's kind of that accumulation of the knowledge, the behaviors, and the skills that shows your cultural competence in that environment. So in order to really connect with our community, it's important that we connect with members in the community and invite our parents, invite people who are part of our business and industry in and listen to them. Find out what's important. What are some initiatives? What are things that are happening? What are policies that are in place? What are things that we can do? And then involve them in our system. And this could be anywhere from creating a partnership program, internship program, partnering with a university to do a dual track enrollment where students can get university credit or college credit while they're in high school. There are many different ways that we can bring this together. But the important piece is to connect and to listen before we jump to the involvement piece. And also thinking about non-traditional forms of involvement. Traditionally, parents become part of the PTA, and the PTA supports the district, and they make decisions and they interact with the district. But maybe all parents aren't comfortable as part of its PTA. So are there other things that you can do to support your parents or have your parents involved in the district work? And so when we think about next steps for you, I think a big piece of what the board can do is to commit to creating a school culture that really is going to embrace and implement a STEM vision and a STEM program that is equitable and where you're holding yourselves and the community and the district accountable for the work that you're doing. The next thing you can do is elicit community support. Reach out, as I said, to those people who don't ordinarily come in and promote their involvement. Think about the fact that some of your parents may not have had positive experiences with school districts. Some of your parents came out of that same school district, right? So what messaging can you use? Social media offers you so many opportunities now to reach parents in different places in different ways and get their input. So how can you elicit that support and what can you do? And then the third part, of course, is developing those partnerships and allies with community organizations. Could be a faith-based institution. It could be a city government. But what can you do? Who can you partner with? I think that's a big piece. If you're in this as a district and you're doing it alone, that's a problem, especially today, because schools don't exist outside of the context of the community. Schools are a vital part of the community. So thinking through how can you develop more activities that get your community involved and get partnerships underway is going to be critically important. I feel a little like I want to take a pause and invite questions, but I don't think I can do that. I don't think we're set up to do the questioning. So I will just move on to my final thoughts and share those with you. I think a big piece of the work that you are going to be doing is going to rely on data. Right now, we have more data available to us than ever before, but I don't think we're always using it as best as we can. So as a board, making sure that your governance is data-driven is going to be essential. Not going by assumptions and feelings and mere anecdotes. And I'm not saying that we don't use those pieces of information, but using them also with the hardcore data. What does the data show? Who's taking algebra? Who is in chemistry? How are our students doing on this? And then once you have that information, because the data doesn't always show why, right? Like getting to the bottom of why that is and how, and then the how. How do we make a shift? What do we need to do to ensure that all of our students are in algebra? What do we need to do to fill the gaps that are happening in 3rd grade and 4th grade? Like really using the data to understand clearly across the district what's happening. The other piece is maintaining that fiscal accountability. And this piece is difficult because, you know, it isn't, once you start talking about moving that money around, not everyone is going to be happy, right? So if we say that we want all of our students to have hands-on, meaningful, real-world learning experiences, how do we need to shift our funding so that all students have that opportunity? Given that some serious questions is going to be important, and the fiscal piece is huge. If we say we want highly qualified teachers in our classroom, how much do we have to pay them to get highly qualified teachers? If we say we want all of our teachers prepared to do STEM teaching and learning, how much are we willing to invest in professional development to ensure that that happens? So those are some of the things that I think when we talk about fiscal responsibility and accountability that we need to be aware of. And then expect opposition. Once you start talking about changing and shifting instruction and equity for all students, you're going to encounter some opposition. There are people who feel like if you give to these students, you're taking away from my students. And the reality is that we can give to all students. We can level the playing field for all students. So don't lose your focus and your resolve when the opposition comes, because it will come. But really remembering why you're doing what you're doing and who is at the heart of what you're doing. Every student deserves to have access to the best opportunities and the best education we can provide. So when we have schools that are lacking, we're obligated to address those inequities, or we are failing as systems to do our jobs appropriately. So your students are depending on you to do what's best. So there will be opposition, but you have to deal with it. And I think it's Brene Brown who says, leaders can be courageous or comfortable, right? So as a leader, are you going to be courageous or are you going to be comfortable? But they don't always go hand in hand. You can't necessarily be both. So part of that discomfort comes from dealing with that opposition. And then the last piece here is make sure that you're building pathways, that you continue to look at STEM as something that goes beyond the four walls. We cannot think of our schools as just what takes place within the four walls any longer. We don't have that luxury. So I think it's important that we really think about how can we partner with other places, other systems, and ensure that we have pathways for all of our students. Now, if you're thinking, wow, Toni, you've shared a lot of stuff. This is, whew, my head's spinning. I hope it's not. But if you're thinking that, and you're wondering, where do I get started? What can I do? What's like my day one, right? I invite you to check out the Alabama's Roadmap to STEM Success. This was developed by the Governor's Advisory Council for Excellence in STEM, and they were really tasked with coming up with a roadmap to overcome some of those opportunity gaps that we talked about at the beginning, and to kind of lay a framework for how to get this work started. It's an excellent document that really has a few different areas where you can focus, and it's a great place to start as you go back to your districts to just have some conversations and ask the hard questions like, what are we doing around in service, and how are we creating career pathways? Do our teachers know about these pathways? What are we doing with our funding? How is access? Who's taking what classes? So if you're wondering what day one, what do I do? How do I get started? This is a great way to get started. And I bring you back now to where I began, which is every child a graduate and every graduate prepared. And this is a very lofty ideal, but it's where we should be. And so if we have every graduate prepared, again, I ask you, what are your systems preparing them for? On the screen, you'll see I have compiled a list of Alabama resources and presentation sources. So if you want to go back and find any of the information I've shared, more details on it, all the sources are there. The resources are Alabama specific. If you're looking to do work around STEM, there is so much out there in Alabama. So you will be able to access that as well. And then there's also a handout that's available for today's presentation. I'd like to also share that if you're looking to hear, remember I said if you see good things happening and you want to scale or highlight it, do that within the district. Well, I'd love to do that within the state as well. Discovery Education, we are hosting an event March 11th. It's a virtual event where you can hear from 2 counties within Alabama of what they've done to shift instruction this year. And that's on the screen. It's March 11th, and I believe you'll get an invitation to that as well. So as I wrap things up, I just want to say thank you for inviting me in to talk to you today. It has truly been a pleasure to share information with you about how we can increase student achievement and just make STEM more equitable for all students. And I invite you, I don't know if we're going to be able to do a Q&A, so let's just wait a second and see if we have access to that. And if we don't, I will bid you adieu. All right. I don't see any questions. So I'm going to say thank you again for inviting me in, and I wish you all the best with your STEM journey.